Good afternoon and welcome back to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of January 14th, 2025. We are resuming this afternoon with our public hearing agenda with public hearing item number 6, and I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through the remainder of the items.
All right, starting with public hearing item number 6, it's LPC 25-05924. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1385, Lot 28, 43 East 70th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a Regency Revival style house designed by Mott B. Schmidt and built in 1928 to 29. And the application is to construct a rooftop addition and to alter the entrance and stoop.
Thank you. I'm Peter Penoyer, and I'm here to talk about 43 East 70th. Advance the slide here. Click on the screen. Sorry. Okay, thank you. This building by Mott Schmidt is being combined with the neighboring building number 41. It is an exceptional work of Mott Schmidt, but has many prior restorations which are not consistent with the original design, which have been approved at staff level, including a restoration of the garden facade. This shows the location on 70th Street. This is one of 3 buildings in the mid-block between apartment buildings on Madison and Park Avenue. The one to the right is by Mott Schmidt as well. Here we have an early photograph, which if you look closely enough, you can see has the correct and original configuration of the door with pilasters and transom. All of that was modified in a completely incorrect way with no regard to the original design. We don't know exactly when, and that's the condition today that we intend to restore to the original design. This shows some details of what we propose on the facade. Again, we're focusing just on the door for your eyes, and the only significant change from the original design, and these are the materials, I'll go back to that, sorry, is that we are raising the top step, the landing, if you will, by 4 inches to be level with the interior of the building, and that results in having 2 6-inch steps rather than 3 4-inch steps, which were the original design, which we regard as a tripping hazard. The other subject that we come to you with is the addition of a bulkhead. We're asked to create accessibility to a roof terrace, and proposing a stair bulkhead and an elevator bulkhead that lead to this roof terrace. This shows you the plan, the current plan with the mechanical equipment, and our plan recapturing that roof for the terrace. Mechanical equipment will be moved to number 41 adjacent. And this shows you the sight lines from directly across the street. We show the other sight lines as well further on. We do see that the largest box you see at the top is actually the acoustical wall, which shields the generator on number 41 from the neighboring buildings, and that was built under a prior approval years ago. And this shows the sight line, and you can see that a little bit of the top of the bulkhead will be visible from the street. The line of doors, by the way, show the location of the elevator when you look at the section. This is an existing elevator shaft. We're interested in reusing as much of the original construction as possible, which explains the location of the elevator shaft. We're able to use the existing shaft. We're able to limit the amount of excavation and underpinning. This is just to show you the sectional diagram of this elevator. We're putting the machine room in the basement, and we minimize the overrun and the height of the structure by limiting the interior ceiling height in the elevator to under 6 feet, under 7 feet 6 inches. These are renderings, computer renderings below that show the various sight lines. You can see a small portion of the elevator bulkhead. On the right, you see it just beyond that chimney mass. On the center, you see it, I think, most visibly. We are covering it in a stucco to make it as innocuous as possible. And on the left, you see that it's just visible. And again, it's hard to detect. It's a sliver. These are the photographs of the mock-up, this pretty much corresponds to our renderings. Returning to more detail of the door, you see the existing condition where the pilasters were oddly jammed underneath the capitals, with many of the parts that normally constitute a typical classical order were simply left out. You can also see at the base of the step on the left that the curve is made of tiny bits of stone, which is clearly not the original intention. At staff request, we did probe into beyond that cladding to see if there was anything that could be saved from the original fabric, and there wasn't. These are the details. We're able to study the details, study Mott Schmidt, and replicate exactly what would have been there. This is the step that I referred to. All of this will be put back correctly following his molding profiles and materials. The coating on the base of the building flanking the steps will be removed and the original finish restored. That is my presentation.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, commissioners? All right, not seeing any questions at this time. We'll move to public testimony and we'll come back to you. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? John Graham?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. This application is advertised as having two components. The Victorian Society is happy to support the proposed alterations to the entrance and stoop. The work will not require the removal of any significant historic material and will bring this building closer to its original appearance. However, we do not support the construction of the visible rooftop addition. The north side of East 70th Street contains a unique group of remarkably intact and cohesive mansions. The designation report notes that these three, at numbers 41, 43, and 45, reflect the affluence and elegance which characterized this fashionable district in the early part of the century. All three were designed by distinguished architects, numbers 41 and 45 by Amar Embury II, and number 43 by Mott Schmidt. The Victorian Society has sometimes supported the construction of a visible rooftop addition when the addition would be seen against taller buildings on adjacent lots. That's not the case here. This bulkhead, the first to be added to this sophisticated group since designation, will be clearly visible against the sky. For this reason, we find it overly obtrusive and inappropriate. We must also question the necessity of adding this visible roof bulkhead and the related roof deck. 43 East 70th Street is a 30-foot wide mansion. It has a 30 by 30 rear yard. There's also a terrace on the 5th floor. Approving a proposal which will diminish both this building and this wonderful trio in exchange for a roof deck at a property which already has ample garden and terrace space does not seem to meet the Commission's preservation mandate. But there's a point which needs to be clarified about the size of the actual property here. The application was advertised as 43 East 70th Street, but all the drawings are labeled 41 East 70th Street. The properties have the same owner, and the proposed floor plans in the appendix show sections of the demising walls at the subcellar, basement, 2nd, 3rd, and 6th floor between 41 and 43 being removed to join the buildings. If this pair of mansions are being combined, which will give them a roof terrace on 41 for the use of the owners, the rear garden will measure 58 by 30 feet. And in addition, the additional terrace will be on the 6th floor at 41. This would make the new roof deck even more redundant. In addition, the roof plan for 41, drawing LPC 52, appears to show an existing elevator bulkhead giving access to that roof. If 41 and 43 are being combined, using that existing elevator to the roof would eliminate the need for a new bulkhead at 43. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, I will turn it over to Gregory College to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one remote participant with their hand raised, that being Zainab Turan from the Friends of the Upper East Side. Zainab Turan, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Zainab Turan here, speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends Preservation Committee commends the applicant's efforts to restore the historic integrity of this stately building, particularly at the entrance and the stoop of the front facade. We regret that the elevator and stair bulkhead is visible from the street, but because it is clad in gray stucco and blends in, Friends is happy to support it. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
And I'd like to ask if you'd like to respond to any of the comments we've heard.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's a fair observation that if 41 were available as a roof terrace, that it would make the roof terrace in 43 unnecessary. The issue is that, in fact, the bulkhead on 41 is just that, an overrun. It is not a stop on the elevator. And to make this accessible and to consolidate the mechanical equipment on 41 gives us an opportunity to have the roof deck. So that's my response there.
Okay.
And also to be clear, this is a combination, and all the documents show it as a combination. However, we're removing as little as possible the party wall so that the elevator in 41 does not give you access to floors on 43, which is why we also need an elevator there.
Okay,
Just to
Commissioner
expand
Goldblum.
on that one issue, it's the overrun that is visible is created in order to provide rooftop access for the combined house.
Correct.
Could you get that rooftop access by, instead of expanding this elevator, having the other elevator go up to its roof? Would that, now it doesn't, but if you were to extend that bulkhead instead of this bulkhead, would that have resulted in a less visible bulkhead that could access your high roof?
I'm going to ask my colleague Lucas Heffley to address this question. I don't believe that's possible.
So although it may be possible to
Sorry,
extend,
say your name.
my name is Lucas Hafley. I work with Peter Bernard Architects. Although it may be possible to extend the elevator in 41 up to the roof level, giving access from that elevator bulkhead in its current location to the roof terrace on number 43 would be impractical, and we felt that it would not work with the design.
And does the elevator's reaching the roof is not a code requirement, it's really, it's for convenience.
Correct. Yes.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, but just to follow up on that, it's impractical to get from the roof of 41 to 43.
They're not at different elevations, but there is a parapet wall that goes in between them. And there's also mechanical equipment on the roof of number 41 that would make that what we feel is an unpleasant experience for our clients who would prefer to exit the elevator directly onto the terrace.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Can you address the question of why the roof terrace is needed, given the large rear yard?
I think it's seen as a desirable amenity for a family that wants to be able to enjoy the roof terrace. There is absolutely no, I can't say it's a health or a safety issue.
Thank you.
It's aesthetics.
All right, any other final questions? Okay, not seeing any, then I think we'll move to our discussion. Commissioner Chu, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so there are two components to this application. There is other work that is eligible for staff level review. So the two components that we are looking at are the replacement of the modern entrance door and modern entrance steps with a new door that more closely recalls the historic door, and a new stoop that also more closely recalls it, but has two steps instead of the third step under the door, which also slightly modifies the proportions of the door from the original condition, but there is no historic fabric there now. And then the second component is to bring the elevator and stair bulkhead up to the roof of number 43. And we've had some questions about that and some answers, so I think that will factor into our discussion on that. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
So let me get the easy stuff first. The work at the entrance is totally appropriate. I'm going to be curious what my fellow commissioners say. I am troubled by the height of the elevator bulkhead, but I also do understand it is being done in such a way that it will just look like a rooftop element. And I realize there's probably, I mean, one doesn't need the elevator bulkhead by code, but I can understand the desire for it. So I'm curious what the other commissioners say.
Commissioner Chapin?
I also feel that the changes to the front facade are quite appropriate, and I have no problem with them. I'm quite concerned about the appearance of this bulkhead, because it is very unusual to have such a visible bulkhead. It's unfortunately very, very obvious from right across the street. And I can't think right now of an instance where we had something that was quite so visible without being in the context of a bunch of other stuff. So you could kind of say, well, blends in. And I'm trying to think of, I'm hoping maybe some of the architects on the panel have some suggestions about how to reduce its visibility or have it blend in. I started thinking of murals, which obviously doesn't make any sense, but so it looks like the sky. But I just, it's troubling. So I'd like to hear what others have to say about some way to make it a little less visible.
Commissioner Lutfi? We can do that.
This is an interesting problem. I also agree that the changes to the steps, any alterations to the, any infill at all on the front is absolutely fine. But I have to believe that there is a way to figure out how to reduce the visibility here. I don't know the answer myself. I'm not an architect. However, I would like to recommend that, the applicant take a look at it restudy it and see what they can come up with. It's definitely too visible, too high. And it has an impact on, what we're looking at and what we accept.
Okay, Commissioner Chu?
Yes, I think that the proposed minor alteration to the entry is appropriate. Yeah, and I share my fellow commissioners' concern about just the projection vertically of this added bulkhead. And I think the testimony about the fact that it's got a sky backdrop and not taller buildings, which would alter its reading in space in the sky. Yeah, I think the fact that it is not required makes it an extra amenity, obviously, for the client. It's a massive house, two houses joined. I would like the applicant, the documentation is very good. It's a very good firm who's doing this work. I really would like them to look at finding another option. I do respect the fact that they're using the existing shaft, because that is respecting the fabric and the use of that location and plan, and I think that's great. I wonder whether or not, yes, it's not desirable, but because of this obstruction up there, I just wonder, is there a way to do a one-story, get up there, move, go up again, and set it back? In which case, yes, it's not a one-step, go all the way to the roof, but you do provide the accessibility there. You just have to transfer location at the top floor before you go to the roof. That would make it less visible. I think the other suggestion that Michael made about reusing the existing elevator and bringing it up would probably also make it less visible because it's set back further. But the applicant should look at it and decide what makes more sense to them. But I would like that to be looked at more.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master?
I think that they did a wonderful job on the front door and the front step in recreating the historic door and all the detailing. In terms of the bulkhead, when I look at the pictures of the streetscape with a mock-up, I don't find it that troubling. When you look at it from the angles, you do have two tall buildings on either side of these small, the shorter row houses. And when you have the gray clad, bulkhead, I think it actually blends in. So it doesn't bother me. I can actually approve it as presented.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I think the entrance and stoop resolution is appropriate. I think the bulkhead issue that's discussed can be resolved. It just need to be restudied.
Commissioner Goldman?
Thanks. I agree with generally what everyone is saying. I do want to note that we do see more than a few multi-townhouse mansion creation projects here. And this one's notable for the extent to which they've retained the quality and character of the individual homes. I think that's really wonderful and should be noted and praised and emphasized to others who come forth to do that. It's very, I think, important, even though it's not something that we cover because the interiors are not designated. I think the retention of that quantity of historic material and the sense of the two houses as being separate is very, very good. Oops, sorry about that. The stoop, the entrance is fine. I also think it's really great, the reason that they're putting the elevator here is because they're trying to keep an existing shaft, and it just goes to the project, which in general seems very sensitive to the overall retention of historic material, which is more power to them. I do think that the elevator bulkhead as opposed to the stair bulkhead is the problem, and I'll bet if they looked at finding an aesthetically acceptable way to get from the western building to the eastern roof, that they could find such a way that was acceptable to the client. I think we're talking about I think the elevator can stay where it is, just up to the underside of the roof and let the overrun come in with the height of the stair bulkhead. But to find either a place for a single run elevator, which seems kind of superfluous, or just raise the other shaft up and make some nice connection. It looks, I'm looking at the aerial photo, it looks like the roofs are at about the same elevation, so it should be doable. But again, it's up to them and staff to work that out. I think it can be done.
All right, so I think we'll take no action to, no, you want to do it? Okay. All right, so we'll do an approval with modifications.
I mean, it's presuming that the restudying and revisions result in something that is either not visible
Okay,
or notably
less
less visible.
Reduce
than this.
visibility,
Okay. All right, so we'll do an approval with modifications to work with the staff to restudy the elevator to make it less visible.
Right. With regards to LPC 25-05924, 43 East 70th Street, Upper East Side Historic District, a Regency Revival style house designed by Mott B. Schmidt and built in 1928-29. Application is to construct a rooftop addition and alter the entrance and stoop. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications. The replacement of the modern entrance infill and altered entrance steps with modern stone cladding will not eliminate any significant architectural features. That the proposed limestone entrance steps will incorporate only modest deviation from the historic design and will harmonize with the material of the building's facade. That the proposed entrance infill will match the historic infill in terms of material details and finish, and the composition of the infill featuring shorter pilasters at the enframement aligning with the existing threshold will record the historic proportions. The rooftop bulkhead will be visible over the primary facade in conjunction with visible portions of the setback modern penthouse. Therefore, the work will not detract from existing historic building silhouette. The gray stucco clad rooftop bulkhead will be simple in form, neutral in finish, and will be keeping with other rooftop accretions found within the historic district. That only a portion of the gray finished wood rooftop fence at the east lot line will be visible at oblique angles from the public thoroughfare with the context of other rooftop accretions, and the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural historic character of the building streetscape or the Upper East Side Historic District. However, I find that the rooftop elevator bulkhead will be highly visible over the primary facade from directly across the street and will call undue attention to itself. Therefore, I recommend that the location and height of the elevator bulkhead be restudied to reduce its visibility from directly across the street.
Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin. Aye. Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passed.
Thank you very much. And we'll move to the next and final item.
That is public hearing item number 7, LPC 25-05644, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1377, Lot 16, 694 to 696 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. These are two neo-Greek style residences designed by J.H. Valentine, built in 1878 to 79. The application is to construct a rear addition, remove the party wall, replace storefront infill, and install interior partitions, and install awnings and signage.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Quays, Barth and Partners. We are the preservation consultants for this project. I'm joined today by Antonio Rodriguez of Kenneth Park Architects. They are the architects of record. And joining us remotely via Zoom is Brian Schenk of DeSimone Engineering and Nick Bowles of Loewe. Let's see, get started here. As Corey mentioned, this is an application for 694, 696 Madison Avenue, which we see right here on the screen on the left. The two buildings are located on the west side of Madison Avenue between 62nd and 63rd Streets. And they are two buildings that were originally constructed as part of a row of 10. They occupied the full block front between 62nd and 63rd Streets, neo-Greek in style. And in the early 20th century, the buildings had the typical alteration of being bumped out for the two-story storefront, and the buildings were combined internally. And so we'll walk through some of that history and context. I'm going to take you through the whole presentation. We're going to start with the scope at the front of the building and then jump around to the back. So this is a proposal for the new flagship store for Loewe, the Spanish fashion house that was founded in Madrid in the late 19th century. They'll be occupying the entirety of the building with retail floors on the lower part of the building and an office above. And this will be their North American flagship. And so the scope that we're going to be looking at today is new storefronts at the first and second stories, new signage and awnings, and at the interior, removing the party wall and the second floor level within the retail component. And then at the rear, a new full height rear yard extension for a portion of the building, and then a partial 4-story extension that retains the uppermost floor of the pair of buildings. And this approach is, as we look at the block, you'll see there is a perpendicular building and lots of things that create obstructions in the rear yard context. And so the full height extension is where it abuts a perpendicular building, and then where the building opens up to adjacent rear yard, we have set back and sort of taken the standard approach of preserving the uppermost floor. And so we'll start at the front. Here on the left, tax photograph showing the condition in 1940. The buildings, as I mentioned, were combined and the storefronts extended in 1912. And so you can see what that looked like historically. We had the two-story volume at each building. We had a continuous cornice at the top of the second story, but also at the spandrel that divided the two floors, and then the tripartite configuration of the storefronts and projecting or splayed storefronts at the ground floor. By the time of designation in 1981, which we see on the right, there have been some changes. The infill has all changed. The ground floor is completely changed in both of the buildings, but most significantly, the cornice at the spandrel is removed, and then sort of creates a more vertical reading of the buildings, whereas previously there was continuity between the two buildings extending from the vocabulary of the cornice. We get the vertical reading in by the 1980s. In the prior to 1912, before the storefronts were popped out, there was a fire in 696, destroyed part of 696, and then at the 1912 alterations included the extension, that 4-foot extension of the storefronts, and combining the buildings. So there was the stair was removed from number 696, which we can see here, and so there was from this point on, from 1912 on, there was a single stair that serviced the entire building, and then connections on each of the floors. So there is a very long history of this being a combined building. And we see that condition in the historic maps as well. So on the left in 1892, showing you the original condition of the row largely, you can see this is the 10 buildings within the original row, and none of the storefront projections have happened at that point, and there are 1-story extensions across the back of each of the buildings. You'll notice that there were breaks in the street wall at both 63rd Street and 62nd Street. By the 1921 map, you can see the connection that's been made between the buildings. So we get that dotted line showing the merger of the buildings, and now this building is shown as 40 feet wide. So it has a separate history from the larger row. At that time, you can also see sort of that light pink stripe out at the front. That's the extension of the storefront. We also start to see changes elsewhere in the row. The corner, this is a 6-story building, was constructed on the corner, the north corner. This is now the site of the New York, the Bank of New York building, 706 Broadway. Sorry, Madison. And then the beginnings of rear extensions. We're going to talk about the rear after the front, but just to keep in mind how the row starts to evolve over time. And by 1930, the corner building, which is 690 Madison, has had a full height rear yard extension. So now we've blocked the view into the rear yards from the south, and also at the north, it is fully occupying its site there. So the block gets locked in at that point. We also have very short lots here. These are 70-foot wide, deep lots. And then finally in 1955, this is the construction of, we have the Bank of New York building. Surrounding it now is this is the Hermes flagship, the Page Cowley new building, 5 stories that wraps the Bank of New York building. And that was constructed in 2014. And then we'll go through some of the other changes, but this is there is essentially a very minimal rear yard condition that existed even historically, and that has been further developed and changed fundamentally through the commercial development of Madison Avenue when we transitioned from the residential presence to the commercial avenue that it is today. Here is the existing conditions. So we have brick piers that flank each of the buildings. There's one at the outside, and then within the center at the what was historically the party wall between the 2 buildings. All the infill is recent or contemporary infill. It's wrapped in red vinyl here. And we have the spandrel that exists here. We assume it's backup material because it was originally clad with a cornice. At 696, the sort of northern bay of the building, everything's been clad over with wood, but we expect that the brick pier remains there as well under all of this wood cladding. And then just a few views of the brick conditions and the existing cornice as it is today. And so here's the overall proposal. This is a really beautifully detailed and crafted contemporary storefront system that preserves all of the existing historic fabric and installs all new material where no historic fabric exists. We have a tripartite configuration of the storefront, picking up on the historic pattern, a new continuous spandrel that extends between the bays and reinforces that horizontal reading that we had historically. The cornice gets restored along the top, the continuous cornice along the top of the storefront. And then there is signage proposed on the spandrel. It was originally intended to be illuminated. That has been changed. It is simply just incised letters within the stone spandrel. And then awnings at the 2nd floor and on the upper floors, which are deployed in the rendering on the right. This rendering, I think, is particularly helpful in understanding the depth and texture of the composition. And so we have a Portland stone surround. So the brick framing stays, the piers, a Portland stone surround within that continuous spandrel that slides behind the brick pier. And then the storefront is framed in wood. It has a walnut finish. And the mullions are wood, and then they extend back. These are quite deep, about 2 feet deep, and creating that tripartite configuration. Behind the glazing is a proscenium arch, part of the sort of creative approach to the design of the brand themselves. This is tiled. It is a crafted, highly textured and variegated, sort of a yellowy green tile that extends along the top and sides, and really we'll look at some historic views, but this is meant to create a viewing box, a way of framing the opening and what's within the store itself. In front of the tile is a small linear fixture that extends between the walnut finish and the tile, helps highlight all of the texture and variation in the tile itself. And then the tile extends down at the ground floor in these two outside bays. These are the egress doors, and there's no glazing here. It's the tile expressed on the exterior, and then you have a sort of jib door or a hidden door that's integrated into the tile facade itself. And so it is this really kind of rich and varied composition that we think is very much in keeping with the innovative and identity-driven designs of Madison Avenue. Here, just in terms of the palette, you see the white awning fabric on the left, the walnut finish of the door frames and, the storefront framing and mullions. The brick piers will be finished this sort of warm gray color. There's brass base and hardware on the doors, and then this gray Portland stone that creates this kind of seamless surround within the storefront itself, and then that variegated tile within the proscenium. In elevation, you can see all of those conditions. I'll move through these pretty quickly, but I think the important elements are understanding the depth and of each of the elements and how that's all articulated. We have the brick pier here. This is the stone frame. The wood is within that, and then that tile facade is coming down right here at the egress door, and then the storefronts pop out here. Oh, sorry. On the second story, that same composition at the edges is maintained. We have the proscenium arch at the back behind the glazing plane, which is here, and then these very deep recessed mullions that connect the two, sort of weaving it all together. Here's a detail showing you that the depth and detail of the storefront composition. This is the drop of the proscenium arch. And another detail showing you, this is retractable awnings at the second story, and then the spandrel panel with the incised logo there. A few details. We have awnings on the upper floors and at the second story. Upper floor awnings will have a small logo at the bottom. It's labeled here as being 3 inches or 4 inches, and I actually think it's 3 inches with a skirt of 5 inches, and then the larger awning at the storefront level. Detail of the incised logo, which will go in 1 in each bay. And then here, just a detail of the lighting cove. So this is the lighting cove. This detail is a little hard because this is showing the door, the tile door in the open position. So it seems like it's blocked, but this is the lighting cove. It is set 2.5 inches back. The front face is 2.5 inches back from the walnut panel. So the walnut panel is out here, but this whole installation is set back more than 2 feet from the front facade. And the only place where the lighting is exterior is at that egress door location at each edge of the building. Moving to the interior, the removal of the party wall. So the party wall will be removed above the cellar level for the entirety of the building. At the front facade, the approximately 6'8" will be maintained of the depth of the party wall. This is This retains the brick pier at the front, new structure to carry, and it allows for new structure to carry the upper wall, and then some extent of build out here. And the projection of the storefront is 4 feet. And so that covers the entire projection of the area. But again, the buildings have been combined historically, so we feel like this is very different than in the instances where you're removing a party wall in a typical row house configuration, because there's been such a long history of combination here, and that this is sort of an honest expression of that long history. You'll also notice that with the egress stairs at the north and south ends, you lose a really significant portion of the floor plate in trying to accommodate new retail space. And so just thinking about how and where one can put the required core elements, the elevator, the egress stair, and bring new life to the building, it's really a bit of a challenge within the existing envelope. On the second floor, we see that same condition. The second floor gets removed and relocated, but maintaining that same extent of the wall at the front of the building. And then just to sort of think about that in the context of the exterior, you know, when the commission considers the impact of removing the party wall, it's how one perceives those buildings from the exterior. And I think, again, not just limited to the history of the buildings being combined, but the continuity of this row, and not really being able to identify where buildings begin and end. You know, there's a certain homogeneity, I think, to the facade that doesn't lend itself to understanding stop and start, and then further kind of screened by this outward plane of the storefronts. I think that the chair will correct me if I oversimplify things, but I thought it was important that we talk a little bit about Madison Avenue, how the district has evolved, and how Madison Avenue has been regulated over the course of its history since 1981 with the designation. And so on the left, a little snippet from an article by Ada Louise Huxtable at the time of designation, but there was significant fear and concern when Upper East Side was being designated. It was a large district, and it was probably the most commercial of the districts that had been designated, primarily Madison Avenue. And there was, you know, an attempt to have Madison cut out of the district, which one really can't imagine how it would hold together. So with that concern, the Madison Avenue guidelines were developed as a part of the historic district designation. Those guidelines eventually become the Madison Avenue Master Plan, but really the philosophy here was that that there was retail identity was critical to the vitality of Madison Avenue, and that there had already been such significant change at the lower floors of the buildings that it should provide flexibility for owners and retailers, with the understanding that retailers don't take on long-term investment necessarily in these spaces, and they turn over frequently. So they developed a process, the commission developed a process for that allowed staff level approvals for the vast majority of the storefronts in the district. Each storefront was drawn and identified what was historic and what wasn't. And from there, the approach was, where there was historic fabric, it would be retained. Where none existed, there was broad flexibility. Alterations could be made that were forward-looking. They did not need to have historicizing details, and they didn't need to match anything that happened previously at the building. And this is fundamentally different than anywhere else in Landmark's world. And it has resulted in what we see up on the screen here, these characteristic streetscapes with very contemporary storefronts, and great variation. Part of that is sort of the lifeblood of Madison Avenue. But it's also the reason why you don't see very many Madison Avenue storefronts before you at the commission level, because so many of these are managed at staff level and within the process that's been established, the sort of codified approach to this broad and forward-looking, I think, really, in terms of how it envisioned the continuing evolution of Madison Avenue. And then on the right, just an excerpt from the introduction of the master plan, and a few key statements here. These additions never, this is talking about the two-story extensions to the row houses. These additions never related to the upper floors of row houses in terms of their design, scale, or materials. The avenue has long been a premier shopping street, both for residents and visitors. This retail activity is reflected in the contemporary architecture of the storefronts along the avenue. The variety and transparency of the storefronts and their contrast from the solid and void, stylistically detailed upper floor facades of the row houses and apartment houses help make Madison Avenue one of the most vibrant streets in the city. So historically, there is this broad expression of transparency along Madison Avenue, and there were various ways of framing views into the storefronts, in displaying goods and creating identity. And so here are just a few examples. We have obscure glass, so transmitting light but creating privacy. You have window treatments where openings are framed and then creating privacy at the second floor level. The concept of vignettes or enclosed stage sets within the storefronts, these settings that were meant to either idealize a certain way of life or display goods, but with a kind of holistic or environmental experiential approach to it. And then finally, with the architecture itself. So establishing an identity and framing openings. Here, this sort of amazing arched opening with, it has fluted material up above, but to create this viewpoint into the stores. And so that earlier description of transparency is really important and really relevant here, because I don't think that when they were talking in the guidelines, when we're talking about transparency, they were trying to limit the ability to have an inventive or creative approach to design of storefronts. They were building the case to allow for it. This is a time when you had minimal framing. This is 1980s, minimal framing and lots of glass, and that there needed to be a basis for why that would be appropriate in the district. And by talking about the transparency and how it was significant to Madison Avenue is how one can support an application like that. But I think this relates to our proscenium and how it obstructs a portion of the storefront. But I think in every way, it does just as these historic examples do, which is framing a view, creating an identity and creating a place within or a scene within the store itself. Of course, the commission has seen other examples of this, and we have other examples of joined storefronts, just two on Madison here, 677 Madison, and 933 on the right. This is part of the Whitney Townhouses project. But going back to that sort of what is approved under the master plan, not the combination here at the Isabel Marant store, but this cladding system. This is approvable at staff level on Madison Avenue. So it's very, very different. The baseline is very different here. So we have these two examples, this continuous interior space that you see, and then also what's most significant, how it relates to the upper part of the building. It does not, this joined reading does not diminish the understanding of that sequential row of brownstones beyond. And similarly at 933, that same exact context of a continuous storefront, but yet the rhythm of the brownstone above. Here are just a few examples of double height storefronts. So each of these is a two-story storefront, two-story retail space within double height space. And so you have on the exterior the expression of what was historically 2 stories. These large vertical bays divided by the location of the historic spandrel, and then beyond that, a double height space for the interior store. So quite a few examples of those along Madison, and particularly in the converted brownstone buildings. Jumping to the back. Proposal here is for the new full height rear extension, which we see in the top here. As you can see, we have a very kind of unique set of conditions back here. This was, again, this whole row was originally the 1879 brownstones. There's been a lot of change. We have the full height extension here at 690, and then this perpendicular building. And so as I mentioned before, the approach has really been where this line is drawn, and it would abut the perpendicular building, be able to house the elevator and the egress stair for the building. And then where it is opened up into the yards, drop down, preserve the top floor and its reading, and then how that then relates to the donut. We'll take a look at this, but there's no real donut here because of the commercial development along Madison, and because of those very shallow rear yards. This is all given over to mechanical and 1, 2-story, 3-story extensions. And then we are also hemmed in by this, this perpendicular condition here. So the rear facades, this is 696, this is 694, and 692. So together the three of them have the rear brick facades are intact with a continuous cornice line. Looking to the south, here is the 690 building. This is the full depth of the rear yards here. You can see, and where we have mechanical on the 1-story extensions. And this is the perpendicular building on the right. This is 622 East 62nd Street. Looking to the north, we have, this is the Page Cowley project directly north of us. 698 has a full height egress stair that's attached at the rear. That rear facade has been entirely reconstructed. And then the egress stair goes up onto the roof that has a 2-story full depth extension. And then beyond that is another building that is 6 stories in height at the end of the row. But that's hemmed in by this projection here. At the lower levels, this is what we're looking at. This is the condition here. And so as we look at that in the block context, you can see the whole north end of the block has been built out. This is a full 5-story, full height 5-story extension. It blocks this building, which is part of the original row, but is 6 stories at the rear now. It's had a rooftop addition that's coplanar with the rear facade. This is the building with the exterior stair, and then our 2 buildings here. And you can see where the rear extension would abut the adjacent building. So in terms of the overall composition, the existing condition, you can see there are existing, what were the original existing 2-story extensions that existed all the way across the row. We have a 1-story CMU full lot extension at 696, and then it's sort of embedded. I think we looked at it it's shown right here, all embedded there. And then the proposed condition, the 4-story extension with a new corbelled cornice to match the historic, maintaining the top floor to match, maintaining the top floor. It returns, and then the full height extension is where it is exposed would be brick with a corbelled cornice to match as well. In section, here's the existing section. You can see this is the existing 2-story rear extension, and then the 1-story CMU. And the overall, this is the cellar level and the ground floor. With the additions, here's the proposed elevator shaft, the new egress, stair. There will be excavation under the extension, but just to the extent of the cellar. The elevator needs to go slightly lower in order to accommodate the pit. But otherwise, that is the extent of the rear extension. And then just to go back to the interior modifications, that relocation or the removal of the second floor, raising up the floor level, and then that is sited here between the existing second and third floors. And so that gives us that sort of open space, open floor plan at the ground floor and the relocated third floor. And then finally, just in terms of context, there are several examples of comparable projects along Madison Avenue where a building was part of a row and full height extensions were added at the rear. And in most of these cases, I think these are all egress stairs. These are all stairs and elevators loaded at the back of the buildings. So here, 714 Madison, we get a stair or elevator at the rear. At 1014 Madison, where the entire rear of the building has been reconstructed and expanded. And then similarly at 789 Madison, extending back with a new stair and elevator and rear yard extension, fully occupying the rear yard. And again, comparable conditions in terms of the depth of those rear yards. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Goldblum.
So in terms of the canopy signage, can you share with us any examples where the name and logo and stuff has been carried up to the full height of the building?
Yes. It's right.
And do those
Can
all
you
have text on them?
These all do, yes, they do.
And that was approved by us?
I believe so, yes. And there are other, I think there was recently a Skims approval that has signage on all the awnings on all of the floors as well.
Are the other,
Not on Madison.
Are the other ones you're showing here without text on them? They're just awnings?
These are just awnings. Some of them have it on the third floor and not on the upper two.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So the large awning on the second floor seems when it's extended to extend all the way down to the first floor and pretty much block those second floor windows from the outside.
It extends down to the spandrel, yes.
Right,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
any idea how often it will be extended like that?
Oh, you need to. There is shade giving because it is on is this what because it's on the west side of the street. It's sort of an end of day, and there's a practical function for these. But
Right, any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
The awning lettering is only 3 inches. Is that standard?
I'm sorry?
The awning.
3-inch high lettering standard, is that?
On the
Upper floors.
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. The skirt is 5 inches on the upper floor awnings though.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
On the rear, the elevator does not go to the roof, correct? It goes to the top
Top
floor.
floor.
But the stair does go to the roof? Is that
It
why
has
goes
to,
up so
yeah.
high?
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? All right, let's move to public testimony, and I'll note that there is no one in the hearing room to speak on this item, so I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one remote participant with their hand raised, that being Zainab Turan from the Friends of the Upper East Side. Zainab Turan, I'm promoting you to panelist. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello again, Commissioners. My name is Zeynep Turan, and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side.
Hear you.
Zainab, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Is this better now? Can you hear me now?
You're still coming in very faint.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna have to. Hello, is this better?
Yes.
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Friends appreciates when tenants invest in their historic buildings, especially when the building is part of a lovely ensemble of a 19th century row houses that have been kept and altered in similar ways. Therefore, we can support the proposal that would clean, restore, and repaint the existing building, replace its windows to match the existing dimensions, and restore the second floor cornice. We can also support the store infill. However, we object to the placement of white awnings with logos on every window of these 2 row houses on the upper floors. Friends Preservation Committee does not believe the store needs additional branding, as its name is already prominently displayed with a 14-inch white logo installed on the gray stone spandrel. The proposed awnings would significantly overwhelm these 2 buildings and detract from the character of the entire row, especially when they are fully extended. Additionally, we had concerns about the facelit logo, but if I heard correctly, that is no longer the case. Could we please ask for clarification on the logo, whether or not it's going to be facelit? Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay. Would you like to respond, and if you can address the lighting on the signs?
Yes, we did change the signage so that it is not illuminated. I spoke with Friends on Friday, and I think we made the change subsequent to that. So yes, that is the case. They would be incised with white finish within the incised letters. Just with regard to the awnings themselves on the upper floors are staff level approvable. So one could have awnings for the full height of the building. It's really the signage component here, and it's the brand feels as though it's an important identity aspect. Their logo is really very minimal in its design, and it would be the awnings, whether they're retracted or deployed, it is still a very limited area where the logo would be present and is consistent with what we see elsewhere on Madison and with other approvals that the commission has made over time.
But the lettering on the upper floor awnings, is that's the name, it's not the logo, right?
That's their logo. That's what yeah, I went through this for a while too. This graphic is their anagram. This is the logo. The Loewe is technically, yeah.
All right, thank you.
But it's a combination of those 2 things for their branding.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
The circulation core, that only goes up 5 flights, right? That goes up the full height of the building, correct?
The circulation core goes up the full height.
The full height and gives you connects to the roof.
And also the elevator is part of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Thank
The
you.
elevator does not provide service to the roof, only to the top floor of the building.
Thank you.
Okay, any other final questions? All right, I think we can move to our discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And we have really three components. There's the storefront, the awnings at the storefront and the upper floors because of the logo on the skirt, and the full height rear yard addition, which provides circulation for the retail space with the elevator going to the top floor and the stair being required to access the roof. And I want to thank Aaron for your history and description of the Madison Avenue master plan and how those guidelines evolved. And I think you got it perfectly right. And so the one thing I would just add is that, at the time, the commission recognized that there was little historic storefront infill, there was more historic enframelment, and did recognize that storefronts changed on a frequent basis and did adopt a policy, which eventually became a master plan, was codified as a master plan about 25 years ago, to allow for the continued frequent change of storefronts with very broad criteria. And really, when the master plan was written, it sort of identified kind of three areas that characterize Madison Avenue. One is the sort of inventive and creative storefronts that ranged in style and type. Two was that the two-story expression was really important to the character of Madison Avenue, and so the rules did have a criterion for including a spandrel to express the floor slab, and three, that it maintain the plane of the street wall and have some large area of transparency. And so this storefront does much of that. It restores the brick piers, the surround. The storefront maintains the street wall. It has the horizontal spandrel to reflect the floor slab, which doesn't exist. And with respect to transparency, the master plan says that the storefront shall incorporate a large clear glazed area to maintain the transparency of the storefront. Blocking of the glass portions should be reversible and maintain the exterior surface of the glass, which this does, except at the ground floor where the egress doors are, where there is no glass in front of it. And back painting or the installation of removable opaque panels shall be permitted if the shop requires smaller transparent areas. And I think that at the time we recognized that there were a variety of different types of stores on Madison Avenue, including jewelry stores, and that there would be different needs for display. And so that was a part of how we thought about transparency at the time, that some stores would need to have smaller viewing areas, and the applicant has shown that that's even the case in the historic storefronts. So I think much of the storefront is consistent with the guidelines that we adopted, but I think we'll need to focus on our discussion on transparency and then the awnings. So the awnings, again, awnings at the upper floors would otherwise meet the rules for staff level, except for the signage, the logo on the skirt, and that is something that the commission, when reviewing storefronts, has also sort of held that line, sort of recognizing that often the color can be a representation of or branding for the whole building. In this case, I think we've heard that the logo's 3 inches tall and combined with the anagram, sort of the brand. So that's something we'll need to discuss. And similarly at the second floor, I think the slope of the awning is maybe the only thing that's really questioned for the master plan. So, this master plan, again, did, as Aaron said, have broad latitude and does not have any criteria for material, what the materials should be, what the profiles should be, what whether there should be a bulkhead or a transom, but really it was about having that horizontal spandrel to retain the two-story expressions of transparency, the plane of the street wall, and to really allow this sort of creative and inventive and flexible storefront type. So with that context, we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this one?
And I think just start talking about the front facade. And I also appreciated the history and some discussion about this typology, which has these upper facade and a lower celebrated retail storefront experience. And I love these buildings. I think they're fantastic. Part of the reason I do like them is because the storefront experience at street level is allowed to be contemporary and exciting and draw attention and light, whereas there's the historic feeling above, and the two together, I think, is what's really exciting about this type. I think that the design being proposed is handsome. I like the storefront design. The comments that I have, and I think that Sarah, you're discussing the sense of transparency and openness down here. The renderings definitely express that to me. When I look at the details, I do realize what you're doing. I think it is well detailed. It's refined. The finishes are nice. It balanced well. But I'm a little concerned about how close the tile is to the glass, because I realize they're deeper mullions than your standard. Maybe it's a foot or less, 10 inches or so. So the tile will come quite close to the facade. I also understand the concept of the proscenium, which I quite like. It's very theatrical. It focuses you into the space and pulls you through, which I think is also very nice. The lighting effect could be great. I wonder if there's other opportunity to celebrate this. When Mark was asking above, and I looked at the same thing in the section, the awning is very steep. So you don't really get under it that much. It only projects maybe a foot and change. So you really don't cover that much. So it really blocks that second story mezzanine. That's why I asked how often you think that would be deployed, because in essence, it's blocking it. Now behind that, the floor construction of the new floor above lowers so much that in fact, the clear light is actually just a strip above the waistband of the spandrel condition. There's not a lot of direct openness. And I just wondered if the applicant had thought about canting that soffit. In other words, if I look at it, I don't want to prescribe design. I'm just thinking in terms of intent of depth. There's nothing stopping you from taking that fascia and just canting it back. And that could be quite dynamic and pull you in, get more space. The steel's set quite a bit back in your section. So I'm just pointing out things that I think could make this even more great. I think it's a very handsome design. I could probably approve it as it is. I just think that that space is the only thing that makes me concerned, that if I experience this from the sidewalk, I won't feel what you're rendering, which I think is really nice, but instead I'm just concerned that I'll feel like that tile is just smacked up to the back of the glass because the depth isn't quite deep enough. Above the white awnings of the punch windows, I think it looks like you are branding the building just with the awnings. I personally feel like the name is not needed. The aesthetic of it tying together straight down to the branding below, I think is sufficient. So I think the awnings are fine. I do think the name is excessive. And then lastly, I would just say that the rear, typically we make our applicants retain the top floor of existing backlit. This is a unique condition where that facade is getting jammed into a corner. I can see that. And I can also see the character of that backyard is mostly mechanical volumes and equipment. However, I am a little concerned that jamming that addition back there doesn't give any respect to the rear facade of this house in the way it's placed. It's not even spaced. It's just kind of a random cutoff of the facade. And I think the applicant is skilled and could do a more nuanced approach there. I just want to be able to see that that addition is an addition It doesn't just completely wrangle this existing fabric and form. I could accept that piece because I realize it's your stair, it's your elevator. Pushing that down a floor, I don't know how you're gonna get that, the egress and the elevator into the building, without other things that we wouldn't be happy about. So because of lack of visibility, I can accept it, but I do think it needs a little bit more care, like the type you put into the front facade. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Master. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, right, so the removal of the party wall. They are keeping the first 7 feet, I believe, which is, when we have seen the combination of row houses and the removal of the party wall, we do, as the applicant said, look to see how noticeable it will be from the street and often ask for at least like the first 7 feet to be kept, which is what they're keeping.
They're keeping that, I
And
noticed.
they
that.
also pointed out that this building has a history of being, these buildings have a history of being
I
combined.
appreciate that. It showed it way back that it had been joined, and that wall violated back in history. I think at the time of designation, it was already. I do think that this brick pier helps this a lot. The prominence of that brick pier and it going into an open floated space, I think it works. It gives you the mark. I think it's acceptable.
Commissioner Master?
Yeah, starting with the storefront, I think that they've done a lovely job in terms of incorporating, I guess, transparency with some design elements, kind of framing the window. And so I can find it acceptable. In terms of the front awning, which will sometimes be, I guess, deployed, I think that they've done a lovely job, and I can find that acceptable. The awnings up above throughout the upper floors of the building, I don't find that the brand name, the Luevo, is that distracting. I think that it covers a very minimal amount of coverage. And I think that because the color of the awning is white, I think that it is important to have the logo there, also to reinforce the branding. If it was a very distinctive color, I think that maybe by itself could be branding, but because they've chosen to keep it minimal, very clean and white, I can accept the very small lettering on the awning as a cohesive element for branding. In the party wall discussion, they're keeping, I guess, the 7 feet. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's acceptable. And then in terms of the rear yard extension, I understand that typically we do like to keep the upper level intact. However, in this situation, I feel like functionally, they do have an elevator and a staircase going up, so I don't see how, you could limit that, without the 4-story extension. So I can find that acceptable as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I thought it was a well thought through proposal and a really clear understanding of the site. The front facade is elegant in its simplicity, and I think the color, the material, the tile, the color of the glass, and it just has this sensuality to it that works really well. The only question I have is the masonry piers are kind of funky, and everything else is really kind of Vienna modern, beautifully done. And then you have these funky piers, and I can understand the aesthetic of that. So I think the front facade works well. And the awnings, just the awnings themselves become a brand. They're white and they're every window almost. The lettering is only 3 inches. And I'm wondering, across the street, would I be able to see 3 inches of lettering just repeated in the pattern? So I'm not I don't think they need the lettering, but I'll wait for others to,
Okay.
the decision on that. To construct well, let me start with the removal of the party wall. Fine. Replace storefront infill, acceptable. And install interior partitions, all well. Install awning and signage, question mark. The rear facade, though, the idea of the top floor keeping the volume was a problem for me last night because I know that the core won't work unless it goes 5 floors. And the visibility of it, you will never see it if it goes all the way up against the property line. So I'm willing to bend on that one. Although in the part that they're making visible, it's kind of, it's kind of like game playing somehow. I mean, the one brownstone goes up to the property line and goes 5 floors, the other one goes 4 floors because, and the question is whether both of them should go up 5 floors then, because what does it matter really? To say I'm following the rules of LPC, and I don't know what it does in terms of the corner, the top floor.
Building on the corner goes the full lot, so you don't see into it at all. So there's no visibility of the rear yard addition.
Right, but what they're doing with they kept the top floor as is on the,
So
on-
the elevator goes to the top floor.
right,
and
on one
the
side,
story taller to the roof.
right, and then the other brownstone, the other side of it, on one brownstone, they go all the way up 5 stories. The other side, they go 4 stories. And it's not necessarily in the center, if I see it correctly.
You're talking about the other ones in the row?
The
the
other
other
lot,
buildings
yeah.
in the row?
No, the same parcel, right? Does it go all the way to the back?
Stops 1 floor
We
short.
stop 1 floor down. And it's overlapped by the elevator, by the core, somewhat.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it correctly.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's acceptable.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. I agree that the front facade is basically okay as is. I think Stephen's suggestions were well taken and would make it better, but I don't think that they are required. I don't think they should be required to make those changes. I think they're just good suggestions. I think for me, the removal of the extent of the party, for me, the problem with the project is that it takes away too much of the original fabric of and reading of the volume of the houses, irrespective of the visibility. And for me, sometimes this is a minority opinion. I have a feeling it will be here too. But apart from, I think visibility is not the only thing that we care about here. And I think maintaining the integrity of the fabric of the volume, which has been maintained despite all these other occurrences till the present day, would be virtually eradicated by the proposal's interior work. And it seems like it's relatively unnecessary on at least many of the levels where there is a center wall for portions of the building. So I would personally find it hard to vote for this unless further extents of the existing party wall were retained. That comment also goes to why I really do not feel that the rear yard addition is appropriate to the full height. It's not because of visibility. It's not because of the urban condition. It's only because of the legibility of the original volumes of the buildings, which to this day remain rather legible. And I think that would be a loss. So I would not be able to vote for it as is. I do understand that the implications of that statement are that the bulkhead for the stair and elevator would have to move to the body of the building, and that would itself potentially cause a visible rooftop addition. But I think looking at the block plan as we see it the block configuration. I think that the variety of the streetscape, as you can see it from the street, there are ups and downs in the skyline of the buildings that would be acceptable to me as a trade for the retention of the volume.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
I think I also agree with Stephen that the names on the canopies are superfluous and should be removed.
Okay.
About ground floor, all the floors above the park wall, all the floors above. I mean, ground floor too, but if you look at the plans at the back, basement they keep it. First floor they more or less don't. Second floor they don't at all. Third floor they keep a wall there, but they can nowhere. Fourth floor it's there, but it's just sheet rock instead of masonry. Fifth floor it's offices. You can probably rearrange, keep something. So I think that for the bulk of the building, you could probably make it work. I remember back to the ill-fated buildings on 8th Avenue and 14th Street, where we looked very much at
interior requesting the applicant to retain interior portions of the walls even when they were not visible from the street.
All right, Commissioner Ginsburg.
Okay, so I think the storefront's pretty good. I agree, Stephen's suggestions of refinements, probably good, but not necessarily. I really question the size of the canopy of the second floor. I think it could go out farther and not down as much and not block the whole floor and look like adjacent canopies. The logo on the upper floor canopies, if we keep it, maybe it's all right on the third floor, but besides that, first of all, you won't read it across the street when all the canopies are out. I basically fine with the party wall, and I think the rear yard addition, given the situation, is acceptable.
Okay, and sorry for the logo on the upper floor awnings. What did you say?
It'd be all right on the third floor, but they shouldn't have it on the fourth and fifth.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think that the street wall, the signage on the spandrels is very well done. It's very elegant and effective. I think that the design generally of the storefront is very good. I've wondered a little bit about ceramic tile, which seems to cover quite a bit of the second floor, which is a little unusual, but if the applicant isn't that concerned about, visible display space on the second floor, they're going to they have the canopy in any case. So it's a very attractive design, so I'm fine with that. I do think that it's very unusual to have signage on every minor awning as they do. It's actually 18 awnings. That's a lot. So either they just should use the color to do the connection, or I could see doing 3 on the north and 3 on the south so as to define the parameters of their, in other words, 1 on each floor on the north and the south at the ends that'd be 6 instead of 18. So that's just a suggestion for possibility. The back is the whole, I do find it, you are losing the whole sense of what the building was, buildings were, even though it's not visible and it's really an enclosed space almost. And I would like to see them have, a recognition of the fourth floor, what it was like in terms of fenestration and its position, even if they had to do, a rooftop, some kind of rooftop addition, which I think Michael was suggesting. I'd be okay with that, to compensate, to create additional space. So that's,
Okay, and the party wall?
I'm, we have permitted that in the past, and no, I think I'm okay with that.
Okay. And the awning at the second floor storefront window. That,
Let me take a quick look at that again. The awning in general, yeah,
it's a retractable awning, and
yeah,
most people have supported it, but there've been some comments about the slope of it.
and I kind of defer to others on the slope. I thought it, was acceptable myself, and I think the logo on it is acceptable.
Okay, great. Commissioner Lutfi?
It's a lovely project. What, I think it's going to be an incredible addition to the Madison Avenue streetscape. It's really attractive and elegant, and in so many ways, it's very understated. And in such a positive way. I cannot think, I'm just going to go to something very specific to start, cannot think of a storefront, or too many of them, where applicants are not coming to us without backlit lighting or halo lighting around the name of the retail store. And I am grateful that you're not doing it. I think it sort of underscores the elegance and sophistication of the brand. And it does, not only does it do you your brand a service, but it's like an ease on the eyes in the streetscape. And I feel that because of the openness at the street floor, with light coming from behind, and the color of and the metal in the spandrel, I think you sort of, it gets lit in different ways. And with the canopy, I think it's fantastic, actually. I really appreciate the openness at the ground floor. And I'm very happy about, and I like the work keeping the brick spandrel at the facade and then the wood continuing. I mean, I think someone said it was 7 feet in. I think that works to just provide a signal that this was 2 spaces. I do think Michael's suggestion that there be something above on the other floors that indicates that these might be 2 buildings. When I think about brownstones that are combined, there's always something. It's not necessarily always at the front. Sometimes it could be a column, like in the middle of the room, just separating the 2 townhouses that indicates there were 2 buildings here. I think that it would be great for the applicant to think about that. And I can't believe it would really in any way negatively impact what they need to do in terms of laying out that floor space, either in terms of offices or extra retail or storage or whatever they're using that space for. So just back down to the ground, to the street level, I appreciate that spandrel also conveying that there was a slab here. And I happen to really like this awning. And I think when it's down, it's sort of like a lovely accent and contrast to the spandrel and the signage, but when it's up, it's fantastic. I also really like the way that they did the tiling, that there's tiling on the front doors on the side, but then it's on the back walls. And I think I really appreciate again the way it frames the space. In terms of the awnings, I definitely think there's too, much branding up here. And whether or not, I sort of tend to feel like sometimes we're a little all over the place about this. Sometimes we're just like, okay, every single canopy is okay. And other times we say, okay, let's do every other, or let's do, as you suggested, Diana, which is not a bad suggestion, one on each building on each floor. I think I would appreciate it if the applicant would come back to us with a reduction, because it is overkill. And really, if they want to have it, it should be no more than an accent that just ties the whole thing together. In terms of the party wall, I have to say that there's not a lot of space back there between the buildings. And I really appreciate the concept of keeping the top floor, but I'm not sure why we're keeping it, because there's not a lot of room for movement there. Who's really going to even be able to be back there to identify the original form of the building? And
You're talking about the rear yard
and the
addition.
rear yard. And I'm okay with not reducing the height a story, and also enabling the building to function more efficiently, because I think that there has been an attempt here, and I think they could do just a little more on the other floors to make sure they're defining that within the building itself and on the facade of the building.
Okay. All right, so thank you. This has been a great discussion, and thank you for a great presentation, which led to this great discussion. I think there is a lot of support for this project. I think this is a really nice project, and in many ways very much in keeping with the intent of the historic character and current character of Madison Avenue, and the intent of the Madison Avenue master plan. And I think we're very close, but I think there's a couple of things that we'll ask you to look at and come back to us with. So one is to look at either eliminating or reducing the logos on the second floor awnings. And at the rear yard addition, I think we have, given that it's a very tight space, and that it's an avenue where, historically these buildings have extended out. I think there is a lot of support for the rear yard addition in terms of, but that there is some, I think there are some commissioners who are not quite comfortable with it, and those who do support it, I think, would like to see a little bit of work happen on the design of it, and how it can sort of speak, how that design can work to kind of speak to the history and the layered history of the buildings. So we'll take no action, and we'll have you come back having rethought the logo on the awnings and the rear yard addition design. All right, thank you very much. All right, and that concludes our public hearing today. We will not be meeting next Tuesday, and so we will see everybody on the following Tuesday, which is the 28th of January. So thank you all, and see you on the 28th.